You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. Russia targets Ukrainian railway stations to stop weapons reaching fighters on the front line. It follows the bombing of 3 power stations in Lviv, causing damage and blackouts. New sanctions against Moscow from the EU, including plans to stop Russian oil imports.
We will phase out Russian supply of crude oil within 6 months and refined products by the end of the year.
Our correspondent in Kyiv meets the volunteers who are training to fight the Russians, among them a tattoo artist and a horse trainer. As protests continue across the US, Oklahoma signs a new law which bans abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. And we'll bring you a special report from Greece and Montenegro, where China is investing billions in huge projects, but there are questions over who is really benefiting. In the next half hour, we'll be live in Kyiv, Washington and Athens. Parts of the Ukrainian city of Lviv, close to the Polish border, are without power and water after the first Russian missile strikes in the west of the country in more than a week. Let's take you straight to the capital, Kyiv. We can join my colleague there, Ben Brown. Ben.
Hello and welcome to the BBC News from here in Ukraine. Well, the city of Lviv, which is close to the Polish border, is without power and water, or at least was for part of the night after the first Russian missile strikes in the west of the country. All right, Bethany, thank you very much indeed. That's Bethany Bell reporting, and that is it for me for this hour. That's the latest from Kyiv, and I'll hand you back to the studio now in London.
Ben, thank you so much and see you soon. The governor of the US state of Oklahoma has signed a new law banning abortions from the point where a heartbeat can be detected in an embryo. It follows the leaking of a draft Supreme Court ruling showing that it plans to scrap the nationwide legal right to terminate a pregnancy. Let's take you to Elise Preston from CBS News, who joins us now from Washington. Elise, good to see you. Is there a direct link between the leak of this draft Supreme Court ruling and the new law we've seen in Oklahoma? Elise, good to see you. Thank you for joining us with that from Washington. You're live with Lucy Hockings. Still to come, Europe assesses the risk and reward of doing business with Beijing. You're live with Lucy Hockings. As Europe's conflict with Russia continues to escalate, China continues to avoid any condemnation of Moscow, while at the same time investing billions in huge projects across much of the European continent. In the second of his special reports, our Europe correspondent Nick Beek has been looking at who's really benefiting from China's expansion. And in the US, Donald Trump's hold over the Republican Party has passed its first big test. It happened in Ohio when the candidate that he backed won the party's nomination for November's Senate race. It is the author and former Trump critic, J.D. Vance, who had been trailing the other candidates before Mr. Trump's endorsement 3 weeks ago. Good to have you with us. You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. Russia targets Ukrainian railway stations to stop weapons reaching fighters on the front line. It follows the bombing of 3 power stations in Lviv, causing damage and blackouts. New sanctions against Moscow from the EU, including plans to stop Russian oil imports.
We will phase out Russian supply of crude oil within 6 months and refined products by the end of the year.
We meet the volunteers training to fight the Russians, among them a tattoo artist and a horse trainer. As protests continue across the US, Oklahoma signs a new law which bans abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. The Sri Lankan opposition tables a vote of no confidence in the government as the finance minister outlines the scale of the economic crisis. In the next half hour, we'll be live in Kyiv, Dnipro, Colombo and Manchester. Parts of the Ukrainian city of Lviv, close to the Polish border, are without power and water after the first Russian missile strikes in the west of the country in more than a week. Moscow's missiles struck 3 power stations, causing blackouts and leaving many without power or water. Let's bring you the very latest. We can go to the capital now and join my colleague Ben Brown. Ben.
Hello, welcome to the programme. Well, parts of the western Ukrainian city of Lviv, close to the Polish border, have been without power and water. That is after the first Russian missile strike in that area in more than a week. OK, Jenny, thank you very much. Jenny Hill there in Moscow. That's it from me in Kyiv. Back to London.
Ben, thank you. You're live with Lucy Hockings, still to come. Donald Trump's hold over the Republican Party continues as the candidate he endorsed in Ohio wins the Senate nomination. We'll also take you live to Sri Lanka. A dire economic crisis there means the government is under pressure to resign. You're live with Lucy Hockings. Sri Lanka's Finance Minister Ali Sabri says the country is down to its last $50 million of usable foreign exchange reserves and has told Parliament the International Monetary Fund should have been approached for a bailout much earlier. Now his comments come as the opposition has tabled a motion of no confidence in Sri Lanka's government. Live to Colombo now, let's join our South Asia editor, Ambarasan Etharajan, who is there. Before I ask you about those comments from the Finance Minister, Ambarasan, what's happening there where you are right now? Ambarasan Etharajan, thanks for joining us from the streets of Colombo there. Time to take you now to North Korea, which has been accused by South Korea's military of firing a ballistic missile towards the East Sea. The launch coming just days before South Korea's newly elected president, Yoon Suk-yeol, takes office. He's promised to take a tougher stance towards Pyongyang. The number of children in Japan is at its lowest level since 1950. Figures released by the Internal Affairs Ministry show there are just over 14.6 million children under the age of 14 in the country. It's believed that women have been deterred from having children because of the coronavirus pandemic. To the US, where the governor of Oklahoma has signed a new law banning abortions from the point where a heartbeat can be detected in an embryo. It follows the leaking of a draft Supreme Court ruling showing that it plans to scrap the nationwide legal right to terminate a pregnancy. Abortion has been legal right across the US for almost 50 years. Namia Iqbal reports. Anthony Zerko there. Just to return to Ukraine, I'm sure many of you have questions about what is happening there on the ground, what the military are doing, perhaps even what effect sanctions could have in Russia and also on Ukraine. Well, Ben Brown, who we saw earlier, is going to be answering your questions on the war tomorrow. He'll be live in Kyiv. He'll have a range of panellists to put those questions to as well. And he'd really love to hear from you. You can get in touch on Twitter using the hashtag BBC Your Questions and email us on your questions at bbc.co.uk. It's always great to hear from you. We're fascinated to see the kind of things that you want answered, so do get in touch with us. And I want you to take a quick look as well at this shirt and have a think about how much you would pay for it if you could, because we are tracking the auction at Sotheby's of the shirt that Diego Maradona wore in that incredible match back in the day when he scored 2 goals, 2 of the most extraordinary goals and perhaps one of the luckiest in football. We're going to be looking into this and thinking about how much you'd pay for this shirt coming up. You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. Russia targets Ukrainian railway stations to stop weapons reaching fighters on the front line. It follows the bombing of 3 power stations in Lviv, causing damage and blackouts. New sanctions against Moscow from the EU, including plans to stop Russian oil imports.
We will phase out Russian supply of crude oil within 6 months and refine products by the end of the year.
I'll be speaking to UNICEF about how children are having to drink rainwater from puddles to survive the war in Ukraine. We'll bring you a special report from Greece and Montenegro, where China is investing billions in huge projects, but there are questions over who is really benefiting. And he broke English hearts with his hand of God goal, but now Maradona's number 10 shirt from that game is set to fetch millions at a London auction. In the next half hour, we'll be live in Dnipro in Ukraine and in Manchester. Efforts continue to evacuate hundreds of civilians, including, we hear, more than 30 children trapped in bunkers under the steelworks in the city of Mariupol. Russia's bombardment of the steelworks plant has intensified. We've just heard from the mayor of the city. He said more heavy fighting is underway right now. Do stay with us here on BBC World News. Still to come, the shirt worn during one of the most controversial moments in football is up for auction. Live with Lucy Hockings. The Venice Art Biennale is shining a spotlight on female artists for the first time, and for the first time ever, the majority of exhibitors are women. But they're also uncovering overlooked works of women artists from the past. The first discoveries are paintings by Julia Lama, as our culture editor Katie Razzle now reports. Well, we will wait and see how much the shirt gets, but there is some thought it might be up to 4 million. It will be interesting to see. Vibke, thank you very much for joining us from Manchester.
Thank you.
That auction taking place, we think, in a couple of hours' time, and lots of interest from all over the world. Don't forget, you can go to our website, bbc.com/news. We have a live page, as usual, up and running there for you with all the latest developments from Ukraine, and an announcement of new sanctions against Russia today as well from Brussels. Thanks so much for being with us. Hope to see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Opportunities can be hard to find,